Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm Jennifer Ebling, and today is July 6th. Today in garden history, we celebrate the birthday of Antoine de Jussieu, the French naturalist, botanist, and physician. He was born on this day, July 6th, in 1686. Born in Lyon, Antoine was the son of an apothecary, and after touring Spain, Portugal, and southern France with his brother Bernard, he went to Paris and ultimately succeeded Joseph Pitton de Tournefort as director of the Royal Gardens. In 1713, Antoine shared the first scientific reference to coffee with the Royal Academy of Sciences of France. He called it Jasminum arabicanum, but Carl Linnaeus gave the official botanical classification 40 years later in 1753. Antoine once wrote quite captivatingly about finding plant fossils in a quarry. He wrote, "I observed on most collected stones the imprints of innumerable plant fragments, which were so different from those which are growing in the Lyonnais, in the nearby provinces, and even in the rest of France, that I felt like I was collecting plants in a new world. The number of these leaves, the way they separated easily, and the great variety of plants appeared to me as many volumes of botany in the oldest library in the world." And it was on this day, July 6th in 1865, that members of the John Wesley Powell expedition raided a garden on an island in the Green, just above the mouth of the White River. The expedition had just thrown out more spoiled food, and the group faced the constant fear of hunger. In a book called Powell of the Colorado that was published in 2015, William Culp Darrah wrote the following: "Fresh fruit had been mighty scarce, and the temptation to steal some greens was irresistible. The Major, Andy, and Bill Dunn filled their arms with young beets, turnips, carrots, and potatoes. The men rode a few miles down the river and paused to enjoy the stolen fruit. Of course, the season was not advanced enough yet to yield sizable vegetables, so Andy cooked up the whole mess as greens. It was a not quite unpleasant stew. After eating their fill and disposing of the remainder, the men resumed their journey. They had not gone a mile before all hands, except Bradley and Howland, were violently nauseated. Bradley explained that the potato tops were so bitter that he had not eaten any. The Major said their illness was caused by a narcotic in the potato leaves, but Hall swore that it was all his fault. In their haste, he had only half cooked the produce." Sumner wrote in his diary later on, "We all learned one lesson: never to rob gardens." And today we also celebrate Marc Chagall, born Moishe Chagall, the Russian-French artist of Belarus. He was born on this day, July 6th in 1887. Marc Chagall was an early modernist, and he created in various formats, including paintings, drawings, stained glass, ceramics, and tapestries, among many others. The art critic Robert Hughes once called Chagall, quote, "the quintessential Jewish artist of the 20th century." And Pablo Picasso once said, "When Matisse dies, Chagall will be the only painter left who understands what color really is." It was Marc Chagall himself who once wrote, "Art is the unceasing effort to compete with the beauty of flowers and never succeeding." And today we also celebrate the birthday of the Mexican painter Frida Kahlo, who was born on this day, July 6th in 1907. Frida is remembered for her portraits, her self-portraits, and work inspired by Mexican nature and artifacts. Frida once wrote, "I paint flowers so they will not die." She also wrote, "I wish I could do whatever I liked behind the curtain of madness. Then I'd arrange flowers all day long. I'd paint pain, love, and tenderness. I would laugh as much as I feel like at the stupidity of others, and they would all say, 'Poor thing, she's crazy.'" It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Ultimate Flower Gardener's Guide by Jenny Rose Carey. This book came out in 2020, and the subtitle is Simple Ideas for Small Outdoor Spaces. In this book, Jenny Rose Carey is essentially teaching a masterclass on ornamental gardening. So if you're looking for ways to add interest, color combinations that are guaranteed to work instead of clash, and how to incorporate favorite blossoms or aspects of flowers, you'll find everything you're looking for in this very inspiring and jam-packed book on all kinds of beautiful flowers. Most experts teach color first when it comes to ornamentals, but Jenny brings new dimensions into play, namely shape and texture. But Jenny's focus on these two things, texture and shape, works surprisingly well, especially if you're someone who struggles with color in the garden. Shape and texture are two aspects that are often overlooked when it comes to flowers, but they are equally important as color in garden design. Without shape and texture, gardens would lack a sense of excitement, mystery, and magnetism, and all of those aspects exist in our most beloved gardens. Jenny also does a great job of keeping today's gardener in mind. She selected the annuals and perennials that she mentions in the book based on their ease of care, their appeal to pollinators, and their wildlife friendliness. This book is 364 pages of beautiful flower gardening all season long, no matter how big or small your space, giving you the confidence you need to make flowers the focus of your dream garden. You can get a copy of The Ultimate Flower Gardener's Guide by Jenny Rose Carey and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $27. Finally, we end the show today with a Botanic Spark that remembers Kenneth Grahame, the Edwardian British writer and conservationist. He died on this day, July 6th, in 1932. Born in Edinburgh, Scotland, Kenneth is most famous for The Wind in the Willows, which debuted in 1908, and it's one of the classics of children's literature. The book celebrates nature, friendship, loyalty, and adventure among 4 animals: mole, rat, toad, and badger. Kenneth had a lifelong appreciation of nature and landscapes, and throughout his life, the beauty of nature was a balm to his many sorrows, including the death of his mother and alcoholic father. And when he was just 5 years old, after his mom died, Kenneth and his siblings went to live with their grandmother, who lived in an old, dilapidated house with a huge attic to explore and an entire garden to play in. The garden backed up to willows that framed the shores of the Thames River and would later serve as the inspiration for the setting of The Wind in the Willows. During his miserable married life, Kenneth once confided in his wife that he felt a better understanding of nature and wildlife than his own species, writing, "I like most of my friends among the animals more than I like most of my friends among mankind." As a father, Kenneth began telling the story of The Wind in the Willows in installments at bedtime and in letters to his only son, Alastair, who Kenneth nicknamed Mouse. In the story, Kenneth wrote of, quote, "the pageant of the riverbank," referring to the array of wildflowers that were in bloom: purple and white flowered comfrey, willow herb, purple loosestrife, dog roses, and meadowsweet. Throughout his life, Kenneth's favorite indulgence was reading books in his garden. As for Mouth, his life story was tragic. He grew up battling chronic illness and blindness in one eye. He had challenging behaviors and was bullied in school. After his struggles grew only worse in college, Alistair committed suicide at 19. At his funeral, Kenneth scattered lilies of the valley over his son's coffin. For 12 long years, Kenneth lived out the rest of his days with his wife. Kenneth never got over the loss of his darling mouse, and he stopped writing altogether. Aside from lengthy trips to Italy to avoid their friends and family, Kenneth and his wife lived reclusively in their house along a riverbank until Kenneth's death from a stroke on this day in 1932. At his funeral, the church was decorated with gifts of willow branches and flowers from children across England, and Kenneth was buried next to his beloved mouse in the cemetery at St. Cross Church. Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening to The Daily Gardener. And just a reminder that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.